Hi, welcome to another episode of Rod Talks. I have a really special guest today. He's been a friend of mine. I've been watching him on Facebook for a long time, and we really have not got to meet each other, but we've been friends on Facebook for quite a while. His name is Andrew Ecker. I said it right, right?
Yeah, you did.
Actually, good. I actually got the name right. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love it, love it. This man has been a very inspirational person to me. I watched him go through a lot of different things. It's interesting is that as I've been following your career, and just watching you grow and grow and grow, and that it has made me actually want to do things myself, and you've inspired me in a lot of ways, and I'm so happy to have you here.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Absolutely. And he brought me a book. This book, awesome. The Sacred Seven. This is a great book. I actually was reading it and I wanted to buy it. And the interesting thing is you showed up with one. So tell me, what about this beautiful book, The Sacred Seven?
So I kind of grew up in a household where I found out I was Indian basically from behind a bottle of whiskey.
Oh, wow.
I came home from school and kids were asking me, what are you? What race are you?
Right.
Like these questions you get at a certain age in school. I think I was probably second or third grade.
Wow.
When this happened. This was in Portland, Oregon.
Right.
And I was just a young guy. Portland was a totally different place than it is now.
Oh, absolutely.
People in my neighborhood that I grew up in, they didn't look like any of my family.
Right.
They didn't eat the same foods that we ate. Basically, we were all New Mexico transplants. My mom's side lived in a little town right outside the Mescalero Reservation called Capitan.
Capitan.
Lincoln County.
Yep.
Kind of really known for hiding Billy the Kid.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's really tiny little town. So my family, this is my mom's side of my family, which we'll get to my dad's side as we go. This was my first encounter with race. So I asked my grandfather, I'm like, Grandpa, what am I? And he tells me that I'm a renegade Apache. That's what his words
wow.
were. And Grandpa, was dealing with his own demons.
Right.
He had come back from Vietnam and Korea, and, he had a struggle with alcoholism.
Exactly.
And that kind of trauma from the war really, came home with him. And,
right.
He's telling me this from behind a bottle of whiskey with a cigarette in his mouth.
Oh, wow.
And that was kind of my first introduction into being Apache, being Native American. And I really didn't know what it meant. I grew up in a home where both of my parents were addicted to drugs. My mom died of a cocaine overdose. My father died of cirrhosis of the liver caused by hepatitis C. So spirituality and living that life that I'm living now wasn't even in focus for me.
Exactly.
It wasn't anything that I really understood. My grandma occasionally would walk me through some Catholic prayers and kind of tell me a little bit about the mysticism, that New Mexico is known for, this Catholic indigenous mysticism.
Exactly.
But it really wasn't, in my focus. So these questions came up in me and started me on a pretty much a lifelong journey. That Apache identity came through in my life. It was a very strong kind of warrior idea inside of my mind. All these stereotypical things that you see on television.
Right, exactly.
The stereotype of the savages and these kind of things. And then my mom was taking me to shoplift, as a little boy.
Holy Toledo.
This was like reinforcing these ideas, and violence in my home and dealing with PTSD and all the different struggles that I had as a child. So there was this whole, real kind of, I guess, I want to call it a conflict in self-identity. That's really what I'd like to share. So the Sacred Seven is that journey. It's coming into the process of recognizing myself as not only, my mom's side, which is my Native American side, but also my Irish German side, how that really is a part of my identity, how my parents are a part of my identity, how all of those things really transform the mess into my message. How can I find the medicine in all of that?
Absolutely.
And it's quite a journey, to get to the place that I'm at here. So that's the basis of of the book. Now, also inside of that conversation of this personal journey is like, how do we as people really step back to this identity where we include our ancestors, that
Right.
we include the earth itself? This is something that I feel is synonymous with indigenous communities throughout the world. Even if you've ever traveled to Asia or Latin America, sometimes they'll have pictures of the grandma or the grandpa on the wall and are burning incense and giving offerings to that ancestral connection. So there's
Right.
there's definitely something there that in our contemporary culture we really don't spend the time to understand.
Right.
We don't really go that deep into our identity to really begin to create a relationship with that space. So this is a journey into my own self-healing, my
Right.
own transformational understanding of identity, and then I give a prescription to people in the book,
Wow.
how you can begin to utilize this form of self-identity
Right.
that really came into focus and it's at the beginning of the book. I was invited to the Navajo Nation to do a transformational healers conference, and I was invited there to do a drum circle. Well, I did the drum circle, but then afterward, there was a man that invited a group of us to go back to his hogan. This is a traditional Navajo home.
Right. Yep.
Kind of looks like a stop sign.
Right. Yeah.
That's
Yep.
kind of the shape of
Absolutely.
it with
Yes.
a fireplace in the middle.
Yep.
And he invited us there, and I'm sitting in this hogan, and there's all these people that are there from the conference, gathering, but also some elders from the tribe came. And as they sat down, it was like an energetic shift. Growing up the way I grew up, and also having gifts, spiritual gifts that maybe your audience can relate to, of empathy. And
Right.
every time a person walks into the room, you kind of feel that.
Absolutely.
And
Yep.
when these Native American elders, these Dene Navajo elders, sat down, there was a shift. It was like the water was to the brim, and then a stone was added, and it was overflowing. And then, I felt something even deeper when they introduced themselves. They introduced themselves to not only the group of people, but also to the space itself.
Right.
And that traditional introduction is something that I practiced in my own life, and it's outlined in the book. I didn't grow up with the language, but I've taught myself how to introduce myself in the language, and I'd love to share that to
Yeah.
the
Could you?
audience.
Could you? Yeah. Please.
It's something that's very personal to me. Not growing up with the traditional language of my ancestors,
Right.
but it's something that I'm trying to practice as
Yeah.
best as I can. So it's Dogate, Andrew Ecker Yinishe, Adona E Nishinigi E De Nishe, Irish Bashachin, E De Dashache, German Dashanali. Akote go e tishli e Portland, Oregon inasha. Shema e Kathy Lindsay Warrior Shaza e Del Ecker Wole. So basically what I'm saying
Wow.
is my name is Andrew Ecker. My mother, Kathy Lindsay, my father, Dale Ecker. My mother's mother, Elva Gallegos, Apache woman from New Mexico. My father's mother, Evelyn Beatty, an Irish woman from Pennsylvania. My mother's father, Leroy Lindsay, Apache man from Arkansas. My father's father, Wayne Ecker, German from Pennsylvania. And then I usually bring in my daughter and my
Right.
fiance, my daughter Bailey, my son
Oh.
Peyton, and my fiance Monica. So this is really a way of understanding self-identity
Right.
that's extremely powerful for the listeners. It's something
Absolutely.
that can really help them in their lives begin to understand who they really are and where their medicine is. Us as individuals growing up in our contemporary culture, I mean, I remember, what are you going to be when you grow up? These ideas that were not enough already.
Right.
And then we begin to hyper focus on this idea that we're a job. So we associate ourselves with a behavior, right?
Right.
Something that we do.
Right.
And then we elect people because they tell us that they will give us a job.
Right. Exactly.
It's not based around the idea of quality of life as much as we have created this identity that's associated with work.
Absolutely. You are what you do.
Yes, and if you look at like kind of the European narrative,
right,
you have individuals that were born as a smith, born as a carpenter,
Yep.
born as a parson, a singer,
Yep.
all of these ideas, and basically this goes back to the tax ledger.
Right.
When one king of a land or a landlord would want to take more land, he would go and borrow money
Right.
from another landlord.
Exactly.
And he would borrow money against his lands, but also the people
Yep.
in the land.
Absolutely.
And this is something that has been brought into our daily lives as well. This is our Social Security numbers.
Right. Absolutely.
A lot of people don't understand, but the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and all of these world banks, and these are some of the ways that institutional governments borrow money back and
Absolutely.
forth. And really, the heart of that is based around the acceptance of an identity.
Right.
So when we talk about self-identity, not only are we talking about personal transformation, but we're also getting into societal and cultural transformation as well.
Absolutely. You know, it's funny that you brought that up, is because my last name being Lyman, that it's from France, from landmen. We owned land, and it was interesting is that our last name was because of what we did. So we were about landmen, and that's interesting that you bring that up, and it's the culture that we are in is that we have to believe that we are something special instead of just a monetary value for somebody else. And I believe my heart exactly what you're saying is that that's the culture that we have to believe, is that we are individual, but we are one yet in all aspects.
Mm,
But we're not a monetary value to anybody else but our own selves.
yes.
I'm very impressed with this. This is beautiful. I mean, I can't wait to dig in and read this book. I really can't. Um, and I think we're going to have more talks on another podcast more about the book and get a little deeper into it. Then, because I want to talk to you about your drumming sounds.
Oh, sweet.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one of my passions in life,
Absolutely.
definitely.
Every time you do a live or something, I always listen to it. And it's really interesting is that I actually put it on before I go to sleep because
Yeah, yeah,
the pitter patter. I just
right?
love that, and I just kind of like somber off to sleep and everything. It's so beautiful to even listen to and that. And I follow you and everything. I just love it. What got you that rhythm? That how did you learn the rhythm of it?
Hmm. This is interesting because when I think about the drum, I
Hmm.
think about relationship.
Oh, nice.
I think about my relationship to the planet. I think about
Right.
my relationship to energy, to the infinite intelligence, to source. All of those things really are a part of that relationship that I have to the drum.
Right.
The drum came into my life. I was basically 18 years old. I graduated high school. I had played in band, and I
Right.
actually was a
Right.
trombone player.
No
In
kidding.
band.
I
Yeah,
love it.
yeah. But I was invited. I had been living in a little neighborhood here in Arizona,
Right.
little Vadio kind of neighborhood called Suntown,
Oh yeah.
and these people invited me. I'd been traveling back and forth to Oregon, and yeah, this was back, growing up the way that I grew up, of course, around the drug culture and all of
Right.
those things. This was back before kind of the transformation that's happened in my life. So I was around a lot of marijuana,
Right.
and I had started to transport marijuana from Arizona to Oregon.
Oh my gosh.
And while I was doing this, right, I ran into these people in Oregon, and they had dreadlocks and long hair, and they invited me to this drum circle, and I didn't know what that meant.
Oh wow.
Growing up in the neighborhood I grew up in, it was all vadio culture, gang culture.
Right.
My
Right.
dad had a gang name in our neighborhood. It's really interesting because my Native American kind of brown family, was in Portland, Oregon, and then my father, his European, from Pennsylvania, German Irish family was in a vadio in Phoenix. So I grew up brown in a white neighborhood in Portland, Oregon, and white in a brown neighborhood in Phoenix. So it
Right.
was
Right.
really a lot of understanding of how to fit
Right.
in that space. So as I get to Oregon and I'm hanging out with these kids on the street and I'm around this whole marijuana drug thing, and they invite me to come up to this drum circle. So I go up there and I see something that I had never seen before. I seen a window into culture. And I still remember it as we're talking about it. I can see the people dancing around the fire. Actually, it wasn't fire. It was a couple of lanterns that people had brought, and they were in the middle of the circle. And,
No.
and
No
there was
kidding.
yeah, there was people dancing in the light of those lanterns. And I remember it so vividly. because it was such a transformational experience for me. It seemed like these people were safe.
Right.
Around the violence and the gang culture of the '90s and that whole time frame. It was a very dangerous time for a lot of people, and I was one of those people that was in that whole culture. So
Wow.
when I came and encountered these long-haired, drum playing, songs, dancing, I was like, wow, this feels safe. And it was the first time really in my life that I felt that from a group of people.
Right.
I mean, even going to parties and, keggers and desert parties. And I mean, in the '90s, a lot of times they would end with, gunshots and
Right.
things
Yeah.
like that. So it was a very transformational experience. And I fell in love with the drum. And I also fell in love with that experience of making music with people. It really, when that teacher came into my life, it began to mold me, it
Right.
began to transform me, even just by the rhythm, the vibration. It was carrying so much medicine for me. And I really feel as we grow in relationship to the drum is giving us so much that we honestly can't always process it. That vibration is carrying information from the planet, it's carrying
Right.
information from the universal consciousness. It's all being delivered through that drum beat. And that's why so many indigenous communities throughout the world have used music and song as a way of connecting to the plants, to the air, the water, the fire, the earth. All of it comes from that space. So the contemporary drum circle is a vehicle for us to begin to utilize this ancient
Right.
technology that really is transformational. It helps people that have a disconnect in their lives, like myself. I didn't grow up with the culture. Now, I participate in activities that are more associated with my Native American heritage. But back then, it was like, how do I even begin to understand that?
Exactly.
So the drum circle really came in as that kind of, friend
Yeah.
for me. And now, 20 plus years later,
Yeah.
right? 1994 was when that happened. Now I'm facilitating anywhere from 1 to 5 drum circles a day professionally, mostly in hospitals, mostly
Right.
in psych, behavioral lockdowns. We work in memory care, skilled nursing, long-term care,
Right.
a lot of hospitalized people, but we also do schools and corporate team building and birthday parties and yeah, just using music and drug rehabilitation facilities. In fact, after this, I'm going
Right.
to
You're heading out.
Native American
Yeah.
Connections Patina Wellness Center, one of the largest Native American drug rehabilitation facilities, alcohol, what's
Right.
a wellness center, but
Right.
the focus is on rehabilitation. We have a number of different clients in the valley that we've worked with, and they're one of the places that we go to twice a month. We do 4 drum circles for them a month.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and
That's crazy,
it's so
man.
exciting.
It is.
Really where we're at with drumming as a healing modality
Right.
is basically where yoga was in the '60s.
Absolutely.
It's like the beginning of a huge movement,
Right.
international movement. Even 10 years ago, if you were to Google drum circle, from what people have told me, it was pictures of the Venice Beach drum circle.
Absolutely. Yep.
And, actually somebody who got assaulted or something like that was the main thing.
Absolutely.
That was the
Yep.
news story. Now you Google drum circle and the first thing that comes up is the healing effects of drumming.
Absolutely. Yep.
And really, the community has looked for resources.
Yep.
Doctors have looked for it.
Yeah.
I'm trained in an evidence-based healing modality called health rhythms.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah,
I
developed
love
by a
that.
psychoneuroimmunologist and a music therapist.
That is awesome.
Yeah,
I grew up in South Dakota, and
nice.
we weren't invited to a lot of the drum circles because it was very much Native American, and we would be an outside participant and watch, but we never were invited into it because of the how do you say it? It was such a specifics of the rhythm, and I never understood that until I moved to Arizona and I got to participate in a drum circle. And I'm not a very good dancer. I don't have very good rhythm. I mean, I grew up in the disco era, so we just pointed and that was all we did basically. But so my first drumming circle that I went to, and that it was out of this world. I stepped into a whole different dimension, and it was so healing. I had no idea what had happened to me. Now I've been on shamanic journeys and everything else and that, but you never understand what it's like to experience a drumming circle until you just let yourself go and be there and allow it. And I loved what you said about it being a relationship and relationship to the earth and everything else, because that's what it ended up being. Is I just followed whatever I felt like I needed to, do, and
Nice.
it made it beautiful. I
Yes,
loved
and
it.
it's extremely beautiful. Like one of the things that when we talk about a drum circle, right? What are we really talking about? We're talking about so much, right? There's ethnocentric drumming. There's shamanic drumming.
Right.
There's what we do, which is an evidence-based healing
Right.
modality. There's just so many aspects of how you can utilize that tool, that teacher, the drum, to really transform people's lives.
Absolutely.
And for those of us that haven't encountered that haven't actually stepped into that space and haven't been able to feel and know what it is to be in a communal experience that isn't based around perfect music.
Right.
It's really based around the experience, the totality of that space.
Absolutely.
It is so freeing,
Yep.
and it's a very important part of wellness that so
Yes.
many people overlook.
Yep.
And I feel like what we're doing with drumming sounds and what so many people are doing throughout the world to get the music into hospitals, to get it into communities, to get it into schools, all of those places. We're at a very transformational point in the collective consciousness.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You said it right there, is that such as Reiki or any other type of energy work, and that was ousted for so many years, and it was only a particular amount of people who were able to do Reiki, and that we found how healing energy and frequency and everything is. And now with the drums and everything else, and that the healing of the frequency of the drums and the sounds, and being able to just leave, in a sense, when our spirit leaves the body, that's when the healing begins. And that was when the first time I touched the canvas of the drum, I felt that. I felt my spirit just take off and leave. And it was so remarkable because it was a healing process. It was so healing. I'm so happy to have you here, because you need to spread the word about what you do and who you are and everything else and where you came from, because this is true identity. What a drum taught me was that we're not the same person when we came into the room. We're not the same person we were a year ago. We're not the same person we were 10 years ago. And that was the first time I touched the drum. That's what I realized. I'm no longer who I was in the past. I am who I am now. And that's one of the reasons I followed you. I just love what you do and everything else.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So, do you do any other type of work with the drums and that? Do you do any shamanic journeying or anything else with that?
Well, really, for me, shamanism and these terminologies are somewhat culturally specific.
Absolutely, yes.
And I tend to stay kind of in my lane, when it comes to like how the drum can be utilized in a clinical setting.
Absolutely.
How it can be utilized in hospitals. Now, we use terminology like guided imagery drumming.
Perfect.
And we use terminology like inclusivity. We create an environment where almost anyone can participate. So I can utilize those terms of shamanic drumming, but really I feel more comfortable saying I'm trained in guided imagery.
I love that.
And the utilization of sound. Now, in that space, I've experimented with something that I call vibrational programming.
Very nice.
And this is something that came to me while I was doing a drum circle in a clinical setting. I'm in a hospital, and I'm hitting the drum. And at this point in my kind of walk with the drum, I used to send healing to people. And I would hit the drum and I would psychically send healing. And I would literally say it in my mind. So I'm hitting the drum and I'm sending it around the circle. It gets to this woman who has a tracheotomy and 2 caregivers. And she's in a bed.
Oh, wow.
And the drum is on her stomach. And she's hitting the drum. So I hit the drum and I send healing to her, and I immediately hear her muffled voice because she had introduced herself by saying her name and playing a sound on the drum prior to this.
Right.
I hear her voice say, "Who are you to tell me I need healing? I'm healing the people who are next to me."
Oh my gosh, I love it. That's amazing.
So it was like, it felt like God had kind of slapped me upside the head. Her spirit had connected to me on a psychic level.
Absolutely.
And in doing that, I was able to realize that if I'm walking the path of a healer, I'm also creating the followers as the sick. So there are
Absolutely.
things going on in the interdimensional space, the spiritual space,
Absolutely.
what you want to call it, the life path of these individuals
Yep.
that are really my teachers.
Right.
They're the people that teach me some of life's greatest wisdoms. So, searching for a place in which I can bring agreement to the
Right.
community, I found that the vibrational frequency within programming vibration of love and gratitude
Right.
is really something that we can all agree upon. And
Absolutely.
as we step into that place of infinite gratitude, of infinite love, we can utilize the technology that our ancestors created inside of the container of collective consciousness
Absolutely.
and fortification through rhythm.
Yep. Absolutely. So I do frequency meditations. I didn't know if you knew that, but I do frequency meditations, and I've been studying a lot about what the frequencies are in that. And they have actually taken, I think it's called a something graph. I can't even remember the name of it. It doesn't matter. But they measure the frequencies, and they measure the frequency of a drumming circle. And it was really amazing that it started out at 90 hertz before they even started. Our bodies are about 75 hertz frequency in that. But inside the drumming circle before it started was at 90 hertz. As soon as they started playing in that, it jumped up to 500 hertz, just like that. Before it was all said and done, that they were well over 100,000 hertz. And cancer dies between 100,000 hertz and 400,000 hertz. And so they're finding out that this frequency coming off of these drums and that will actually help with killing cancer. And that.
Mm.
And it's really interesting is because they're talking about the channeling of the energy that once you become one with the drum, one with the earth, one with God and everything else, and that's what creates the highest frequency out there. And it's really interesting. They say if you can be in God's grace, it's 39.7 megahertz to be in God's grace, and that's being as highest channeling you can get. And they were talking about how drumming circles actually can bring God's grace close to Earth. And it was really interesting read that I kind of wanted to share that with you because
yeah, that's really amazing. Of course, I've had that experiential evidence in my life.
Absolutely, yep.
And being in that space, there's a terminology called entrainment.
Yes.
And so Christian Huygens, who was a scientist in the 1600s, he put pendulum clocks on the wall, and he swung the pendulums at different times.
Right.
And eventually, over a period of time, all of the pendulums began to swing together.
Together, yeah.
So this was for him evidence of this process of entrainment. So this is one thing synchronizing itself to a community. So we see it in nature. We see birds that fly, and they're synchronized. We see schools of fish. Also in dance, when you get a group of people dancing together, they can synchronize themselves.
Yep.
And of course, with music and drumming, it's a very powerful tool. And we can do more in that space
Absolutely.
than we can by ourselves.
Absolutely.
I see it all the time. We'll go into hospitals and we'll set the drum down in front of someone, and the nurses will literally come over and they'll say, "Oh, they won't play." And this is what we're up against on a psychic level.
Right.
Because they're creating a metaphysical architecture that they're holding for those individuals.
Yep.
I've come up with some terminologies that maybe a lot of people aren't familiar with, but I know your audience probably understands when I say metaphysical architecture.
Right,
I'm talking about the space that the individual is holding in their mind.
Yep.
Now, there's also a collective metaphysical architecture that's associated with the agreement of the institution.
Right.
And that in turn can actually create an entity.
Right. Yes.
And this is something that we can talk about as well, because there's an access point into the density of that frequency. So when we begin to step into this space, where
Right.
we utilize frequency, we utilize sound, we utilize the rhythm of the drum, we baffle the institution. We baffle the nurses, the doctors, the institutional people. I mean, I've been in circles. This one time I was in a lockdown facility, multiple different doors I have to go through. Not just one door, I'm talking multiple doors. I get back there, it's a women's facility. I sit down, I start drumming. Well, this woman comes over and she sits down almost in my lap. The activity coordinator, the person who hires me, she comes over and she whispers in my ear and she says these words. She says, "Don't worry about her. She's a wanderer. She won't be there long." This is what she is literally calling this human being that's suffering in an institution. She's labeled her as a wanderer.
Absolutely.
That's a space that that person is holding. They're
Right.
looking at the behaviors of yesterday. You know, as the drum taught you that you're not yesterday, you're
Right.
not tomorrow, you're today.
Exactly.
That's the space that we hold.
Yep.
And I hold that architecture for the individuals that come into our circle. And when she came into the circle, she sat down. I start drumming. Next thing you know, she starts singing. The activity coordinator jumps up and goes and gets the head of nursing. She goes and gets all of the administrators. They're now looking in the hallway at me drumming with this
Right.
woman, and her jaw is down.
Yeah.
At the end of the circle, she comes over, grabs me by both arms, and she says, Andrew, I don't know if you know what just happened, but that woman, I have worked here for 7 years, and she has never sat through an activity. In fact, she's never even said anything to anyone.
No kidding. I love stories like that. That's an amazing story. It really is. And it is. You hit it on the nose about synchronicities and dimensional walkers and everything else. I mean, that's what it is. You've hit everything on it. I know you're not the same person that you were many years ago. You are totally different. You can see it in your eyes. You can see it in the energy that you carry. You're a vibrant, loving person, and it's really
thank you.
You have a rhythm of your own, which is just amazing. I love it. So we got to kind of wrap things up here and everything else. But tell us where they can find you.
Okay, that's they can get the book for free at thesacred7.com.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a free PDF downloadable copy. If you want a signed copy with a personal message, you can also order one there. The PDF.
Where's my signed copy?
Yours is coming. I didn't actually. I can't. You know, I was a rush getting over here.
Gotcha,
if they want to learn more about drumming and drum circle facilitation, they can check out our Facebook page, Drumming Sounds. We're also drummingsounds.com if they'd like to book us for a conference. We have a webinar coming up that I'd like to share with the audience. I'm training people now in drum circle facilitation.
That's awesome.
They get to come out here, spend a week with us, do multiple different engagements. It's a whole awesome training package, equipment, gear. It's a lifestyle using sound to heal. And we want that to go around the world. So we're helping people start their own professional drum circle facilitation businesses.
That is awesome. Wow. So again, it's drummingsounds.com, on Facebook, Drumming Sounds, and then sacred7.com, right?
Sacred7.com for the book. They can get a free copy there.
I love it. Absolutely. Well, I just want to tell you look great.
Thanks.
Andrew's been working out. I've been watching and following him.
Yeah.
It's like he put his weight on Facebook, how much he started out with, and that is like, ooh, that's how much I weigh. So secretly, I've been in a contest with you.
Great, man.
Behind your back, you have no idea.
Nice.
And you're winning, by the way.
Well, we motivate each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Even secretly, we motivate each other.
Yeah.
Andrew, it's a pleasure to have you. It's
for sure.
So exciting to have you. Andrew's going to be back on. We have a lot more to talk about, and he has to get off to his next adventure, which is
Native American Connections.
Native American Connections. So I wish everybody a blessed night. You are loved, and I am blessed. And thank you very much, Andrew, for being part of this.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a great night.
Sweet.